Hey there everybody, this is Lee with Creative2xmom, and today we're going to be talking about some of our favorites from the homeschool year. So welcome back to my channel. My name is Lee and this is Creative2xmom. This channel is all about homeschooling, parenthood, and thriving in the day-to-day. And right now I've got the giggles because our little neighborhood friend is talking to my cat in the window. I don't know if you can hear her or not, but it is absolutely making me laugh. So I'm going to do my best to push through and try to make this video a little bit professional. Today we're talking about some of our favorites from the past homeschool year. I've got a variety of things in front of me, from curriculum to games to read-alouds, picture books, handicrafts, so let's get into it. So the first category I'm going to talk about is chapter books. We love to read aloud with the kids, whether it's before bed at night or sometimes in our morning basket time. I have 3 books I want to talk to you guys about today. The first one is Homer Price. Now, we read Homer Price a few years ago, and this is a great glimpse into sort of that middle America, mid-19th century, all the adventures and everything that he goes on. So your kids will be exposed to sort of some dated stories, some concepts that are not so familiar to our current culture. But he is so funny. He gets himself into these scrapes where he sort of means well and he doesn't realize what he's doing, and then all of a sudden he's in this situation where he's got to solve what happens, and it just ends up working out for him. They're very lighthearted, very funny. Our favorite one is the one about the donuts, how he starts going to help at the donut shop and he uses this recipe and it ends up creating a huge amount of donuts and how he's got to get out of that situation. They are absolutely hilarious and so much fun. We read them this year with our 3rd grader and our 6th grader. And even my 9th grader, who's not really into doing chapter books anymore, he picked up the book one day and he was like, oh yeah, this is a funny one. So if you're looking for something sort of in that mid-20th century time period, Homer Price, definitely worth reading. The next book I want to tell you about is called Snow Treasure. This is by Marie McSwiggan. This one would be a great one to include into your World War II unit study. It is about the kids in Norway and how they are trying to quietly, they have been occupied by Nazi troops, and they're trying to quietly, I think it's money that they're trying to get out of their village.
It's gold.
Oh, it's gold. My 3rd grader just corrected me. So they're trying to get this money out so that the Nazis can't get it, and they're using the kids to smuggle it out on snow sleds. And it's all about how this village creates this network of sort of like checkpoints for the kids where they can go if they're in trouble or if they need to hide. Super, super good book. We loved this one. I can see us revisiting this one in the future. So the last book I want to talk to you guys about is Gold Rush Girl by Avi. Now, you guys have had probably 2 videos about this one already, so I will keep it brief. I recorded about this one, I think back in February, in my What We Read, because I had to review it for the publisher. And so that was my initial review, and then we read it again in May. I read it with the kids because we were in a Gold Rush unit. And both times, it was like the story never got old. We were constantly looking for more. So that is one, if you're going to study the Gold Rush, or if you just have a kid that's into adventure, into learning about different time periods, that is one I would definitely recommend. So while we're on the subject of books, let's talk about picture books. I have 2 that we read this year that were new to me that stood out that I wanted to share with you guys. The first one should come as no surprise. I think everybody's read it except for us, and that's Cranberry Thanksgiving. This is one of those books that I have heard about before. I know that 5 in a Row includes it. It's just one that we never read until this year, and I thought it was so cute, so lighthearted. Great story about not looking on the exterior, not judging a book by the cover, because you've got this neighbor who looks like he's really gruff, and then you've got this man from town who looks like he's very polished and put together, and so you constantly have this contrast between the two. And then when you kind of come into the story, you find out what they're actually like. It's definitely one that we will be pulling out again next Thanksgiving, and it has a great recipe for cranberry bread, which we turned into muffins. And the second one was called Midnight Teacher. Now this is a book that we pulled for Black History Month. I had never read it before. I'd never heard this story before, but it's a story of a young slave who's taught how to read and write by her master's children. And as she grows older, she becomes a teacher for all the slaves on the plantation so that they can learn to read and write. And they have to do this in secret. That's why she's called the Midnight Teacher. They find a place in town because her class becomes too big. They find a place in town, and it's all about how she passed on her knowledge from generation to generation. And in the end, it tells about how many people and how many lives she actually touched. My delight in this story was there are so many people that we have resources for, like Martin Luther King, like Rosa Parks, and not to take from what they did, but I love hearing these little stories along the way of normal, everyday people who created this huge impact in where they were. I find that they're a great inspiration for my kids and seeing that they can do big things in the world. So now that we've talked about books, which is always the biggest thing that I include in our homeschool, let's talk about some curriculum. There were a few surprises this year that I did not expect. The first one was this 12 Months in the Forest. This is by the Thinking Tree Journals. I happened to grab just 2 copies of these for my 2 that I homeschooled this year. And I thought, okay, we'll give it a shot because I love getting out in nature. I love showing the kids like how things grow. I love going hiking and seeing natural wonders. So we pulled these out. Our favorite parts were using the calendar every day. We would note something in nature that we would use the calendar for. And then I also loved how she included poetry and having the kids pull nouns or verbs based on a particular letter. And then we would create our poem out of that. The other pages that we really enjoyed were the plant pages and the animal pages. Now, we did not get through this whole thing last year, so we're going to turn it around and use the pages that we didn't use last year. This year, we sort of included this as part of our morning time, part of our science study, if you will. We put more of a focus on it on science days. Really good one. I would definitely recommend that one. I haven't used a lot of the Thinking Tree Journals, but we really liked this one. Another surprise for me this year is that we typically use rod and staff grammar with our kids, but I pulled the 7th grade one for Lydia. She was in 6th grade last year, and they are really rigorous, really good. I love them. I totally support the company. But it sort of came to, in those middle school years, the grammar was outpacing her just abilities. Not that it was too hard, but it was so, how do I want to put this? It almost didn't feel grade appropriate. It started to feel like in the 7th grade book you were doing high school level grammar, even some stuff that I didn't really get into until I was in college. So we put that aside because it was just getting to be too much. And I pulled this out. I happen to have a copy of the Easy Grammar Plus student workbook. I had used this with my older son, so it was partially used. And we just went through it and did a page a day on whatever topic I felt like we needed some practice in. Nouns, pronouns, great, whatever. Not necessarily needing a review in that. Maybe articles, because there's 3 articles that sometimes get overlooked. Sometimes adjectives, sometimes adverbs, where to use commas, where to use who, what, which, that, this, those, and these. That is a weird sort of rule in there. So they're pretty simple, pretty basic, to the point. This took about 15 minutes a day. If you're just looking for either a grammar review or a really straightforward grammar program, I would pull this one. And then you guys know that we loved our Shakespeare study last year, and I included a video earlier this year about teaching Shakespeare in the elementary years. I will link that down below. One of our great surprises was Tales from Shakespeare by Charles and Mary Lamb. I had heard about this. It sort of has floated around the homeschool community for a while. My fear was that it would be too difficult to understand, so I've always done the paraphrased version by Nesbitt. You'll find that in that video as well. what I was finding, this was a great transition. So we would read the paraphrased version to sort of get an overall view of what the play was about. Then I would pull Charles and Mary Lamb. This is a great transition between sort of modern everyday language and Shakespearean language. We know that that can be pretty difficult to understand even as you get older. So this held a lot of the same language, but wrote it in story form. So even though you were getting higher level vocabulary, you weren't getting the full Shakespeare play, but you weren't getting modern day. It's sort of a great transition. I don't know if that's making any sense, but this one I would use as that transitional period, especially for my middle schooler. She was picking up a lot of the plot line from what we were reading, and it was still sort of getting them into that mindset of wordplay, figuring out archaic words, that sort of thing. So let's talk field trips. This was a weird year for talking about field trips because, I don't know, we didn't hit our rhythm really in the fall. We did do a few field trips in the fall, and I was really starting to ramp up and plan for the spring when everything was canceled and closed. So it was not a great year for field trips, which for me is one of the delights of homeschooling, is being able to get out in the world and see real world application. But we did hit our major once-a-year field trip. We always go down to Monterey and go to the aquarium, which of course has to be our highlight field trip for this year because it was such a funky year. We had so much fun with that one. I will try to insert some pictures here so you guys can kind of see. But I would say if you're going down there, try to look up some of their field trip resources ahead. They have some stuff online. They used to have a booklet that you would get. I don't think they're doing that anymore, but they have a lot of electronic resources online, things to start thinking about and studying before you go. So I will link their website or their Instagram or something down below. Try and direct you in the right direction for that. I would also say if you're going to go do this, it is such a huge aquarium. Sort of have a plan for the day. Pack a picnic lunch. They have a patio that you can have a picnic lunch on, or plan out someplace nearby. Our favorite place is, I think it's called Fresh Awakenings or Early Awakenings or something. That's our favorite place to go eat when we're there. And plan out what feedings you want to go to. We have done some different ones. We've done the stingray feeding, I think. We've done the penguin one. I would really love to see the otter one. I don't think I've seen that one yet. So plan out your feedings for that trip. But that, of course, was our favorite. I know I have some friends down closer to the aquarium that love to go every year. We make it a big trip because we're so far away, but that one was definitely a highlight. And my last category today is going to be handicrafts. And as the years have gone on, I've tried to incorporate more handicrafts learning, not just as their own category, but also trying to put them into what we're learning. So these two this year worked really well for us. The first one was a stitched burlap heart ornament. At Christmas time, we sort of went back in time and did a unit study on like Pioneer Christmas. And so I cut out heart shapes from burlap and I had my kids stuff them. We sewed buttons on them and then they stitched around them and closed them up and made ornaments out of them. This was a fun one because it's really easy to stitch burlap. The openings are so big. It's a great way to learn some basic stitching, whether it's a whip or a running stitch, some stuffing, and it's one of those that even the little guys can work with if you have a plastic needle. Super easy. That transitioned us into doing some more hand stitching in the spring when we went to doing our Asian study. I found these little hangabouts. They were on Rainbow Resources, but I think they've sold out, or at least part of them have. This is a Japanese girl, and it was kind of a process. All the pieces came cut. They're all felt pieces, so if you have a child who has done any hand stitching before, this would probably be an afternoon project. But if you've got little ones, we broke it up over about 2 or 3 days. So you have all the different layers that you're stitching on, and then eventually you stitch her together and stuff her, and then she can either hang on a keychain, hang on a backpack, something. This is the one that my 8-year-old worked on. I did have to help him a little bit. Main thing was making sure that he kept his needle threaded and helping him figure out which layers went where. The instructions are pretty simple, but it's always nice to have mom around. So that's our homeschool favorites for the 2019-2020 homeschool year. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know what were some of your favorites. Did you have a few surprises or some old favorites that you return to again and again? I'm always looking for new resources, and of course it's summer and it's that planning time of year, so I'd love to know what you love. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and we'll see you next time. Bye guys.